Learning hybrid photography, one day at a time.
Become a smarter photographer every day at discovermirrorless.com.
It's free and phone and tablet friendly.
Hey, it's Will Crockett, and welcome to Crocketville. Hey, I have been slightly bombarded with folks who are mostly still photographers getting into video, and they want to shoot video seriously. And of course, we're in that phase as a company here. As you can tell, we are picky about our image quality, and we've got very precise lights and cameras. And this video that you're looking at here, even though it's presented on YouTube, which knocks down some of the image quality, it's rather nice, high quality video. It's certainly up to my standards. Well, a lot of folks are making up these little rules when you shoot video. All right, here's a rule that doesn't make any sense and it doesn't matter. And in fact, I'll just prove it to you so you can move on, okay? Rule for video number 642 from people who don't know any better is if you're shooting at a frame rate of 30 frames a second, then your video shutter speed needs to be double that. It needs to be a 60th of a second. If you're also shooting at 60 frames per second, which we are right now, then your shutter speed needs to be, I love that term, needs to be 125th. Well, that's just not true. So please, when you hear those concrete rules about photography, that should be your first clue that they're wrong, right? Because there really are no concrete rules when it comes to photography. Now, it is a good idea for a starting point to use that, but that is not a concrete, locked in stone system. Here's what's up. We're shooting 60 frames a second, ISO 1600, at a shutter speed of 1/125th. Now, we want to be able to change that and show you what happens. Now, I'm going to show you motion-wise. See how my head moves back and forth? It's pretty sharp. It's not jittery. It's not bumpy. Okay, we're going to stop the camera, and I'm going to go up to ISO 3200, and I'm also going to go up a shutter speed to compensate for it because I'm not going to change my lighting. My lighting and my aperture are going to be identical for this entire test. I'm just going to mess with shutter speed, and then, of course, ISO to bring the exposure back down. So here comes a stop. Hey, notice a big difference? No, not really. This is 1/250th of a second now at ISO 3200. Aperture is the same, lighting is the same. Now watch, I'm going to move my head. Now we're getting a lot of pictures, right? 60 pictures per second being put together, and you'll see the motion of my head is very sharp, right? It doesn't have a lot of motion blur to it. Let's put a little motion blur in there, and I'll show you what we mean. We're going to stop the camera, and we're going to go down past ISO 1600. We're going to go whoop, down to 800, which is going to drop our shutter speed from 125th down to a 60th of a second, and watch the big difference. Well, there you go. There's a 60th of a second shutter speed. We're still at 60 frames per second on our camera. We're not changing that. And we've dropped our ISO down to 800. So everything else is the same. Now watch my head movement. Okay, a little motion. There you go. Now we've just violated the rule, haven't we? 60 frames a second, and we're using a shutter speed of a 60th of a second. How can that be? Look, technology in video cameras, particularly modern video cameras, can handle more things than you could ever imagine. I mean, it blows my mind, and I get to work with these guys. Let's go another step down, okay? Still 60 frames per second, and I want to push the shutter speed down to a 30th of a second and show you what happens. Hey, look at that. We're at 60 frames a second on our frame rate on our camera. Nothing's changed. Lighting's still the same. White point, white balance, everything's the same. But we're shooting at a shutter speed of a 30th of a second. Wow. How can the camera do that? How can it make a 30th of a second picture 60 times per second? Well, that tells you how good video really is. Now, watch my head movement. You're going to see a change here. Okay? Notice how my head is a little blurry. That's actually a good thing. See, that's a creative control. So if you want your motion to be soft and comfortable, you don't want to use a high shutter speed. You want to use a low shutter speed like this, right? This is a creative control. This is why when these silly little axioms pop up that you have to do this and you have to do that, it's ridiculous because all it does is stifle your creativity. Get a camera that allows you to do what you want to do. Now, if you're capturing fast motion, you don't want to use a 30th of a second shutter speed. You don't when you shoot pictures, do you? You're shooting pictures here. So if you're taking a picture at a 30th of a second and something's going to be moving fast, it's going to blur. Well, same thing with video. Let's go one more, shall we? Let's go down to a 15th of a second, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, now we're getting in trouble, right? Yeah, the video's starting to look a little funky. Why? Well, that's because I'm moving and we're now shooting at a 15th of a second. So a 15th of a second shutter speed, the camera's going to shoot 60 times per second, and it's going to overlap that data. Well, that's going to make this a little jumpy, right? See it? It's kind of bloppy. Just remember that. That might be something that you can use one day. Say you want this effect. You can shoot that way if you want to. I don't want to shoot my vlog posts this way because creatively, I don't like it. Now, technically, can we do it? Of course we can do it. 60 frames a second, 1/15th of a second shutter speed, and we've kind of proven our point, haven't we? We could do the same thing if we set the camera to a 30-second FPS frame rate or 24 FPS. We could show you the same thing. So here's what you need to do. Instead of listening to knuckleheads that say you got to do it some way, get your camera out and test it. Sure. And you can always go to Discover Mirrorless and Shoot Smarter. And you know one thing, don't you? Yeah, you know you're going to get the truth. So there's the truth. Thanks so much. Bye. This vlog post is Crockett approved.